Hello from Los Angeles. We have bad news for the Democrats. Yes, even more bad news. George Soros, the guy who spent the last few elections donating tens of millions of dollars trying to elect progressives and push the progressive issues, started SOS, where you can control the Secretary of State, you know, the people who are in charge of the recounts in states like, oh, I don't know, Minnesota, Al Franken. Well, Soros now says he has stopped dumping money into this midterm election because, if I may quote him, I cannot stop the avalanche that is coming for the Republican Party. Yeah, that's great. Just a note, by the way, spooky dude George Soros, hey, always a delight to see you. But just a note to the Republicans, don't get too comfortable, because Americans are not the same old pull the D or pull the R schlubs that we have been in the past. If Republicans do find themselves winning a lot of votes, warning, you start nudging, you start spending, you start being corrupt and playing the old game, guess who George Soros won't be able to help next time? Yes, you. From Los Angeles, California, hello, America. Good to be back with you. I have been out for a couple of days, although through the miracle of digital capture, it seems like I've only been gone a day, but I've actually been on the road since Friday. I've been undergoing some medical tests, and everything is fine, and I'll tell you about that tomorrow because I've learned something that I want to share with you. But tonight, I want to get to the news that you and I have missed together. And I don't even know where to begin. Bill Clinton said basically that half of America needs psychiatric help. That's an amazing story. Then food behavior scientists are trying to modify our kids' eating habits right out of Cass Sunstein's book, Nudge. Democrats are on now a smear campaign against the universally respected Chamber of Commerce. And there's an incredible story of the miners in Chile that are being rescued after 70 days trapped inside the mine. Where to begin? Where to begin? Well, I know the main story of the day is the mine story, and rightfully so. There are many lessons that we can draw from that one. And I will get to it here in a minute, but I want to go a different direction than most people. I mean, it's the Glenn Beck program. What? Of course we're going to be a little odd and unusual. I'm going to start with something that I was on the plane on my way out to Utah to have some tests done at the Huntsman Cancer Institute. And by the way, I don't have cancer. But I was on my way out there for some medical tests. And I was reading a couple of things. I had some things that were saved on my iPad, and then also I had the New York Times that I was reading it. And I want to start with what I found in the New York Times on Saturday. The horrific attacks that took place in the Bronx a little over a week ago. I don't think I have ever read anything quite like this. I guess maybe Jeffrey Dahmer, but Jeffrey Dahmer was one individual, and so you can imagine monsters one at a time. This unimaginable hatred in the attacks that happened in the Bronx left me with a sinking feeling and a burning question. Who are we, and who are we becoming? I think before we go any further as a nation, it's time that we honestly examine ourselves. And to have a complete, honest examination, we need to hear both the worst and the best. Hatred is growing in this country. Darkness is growing. I believe the light is as well. But I want to talk to you first about some of the darker things and this story that happened in New York. I want to warn you, there are disturbing details in the story, and normally I would avoid them, but I intentionally want to spend some minutes on them because I think it's something that we need to discuss. If you have children in the room, please turn the television off at this point. This story out of New York takes place, and it's centered around a group of 10 wannabe gangsters who call themselves the Latin King Goonies. They unleashed a series of vicious, sustained attacks beginning October 3rd on two 17-year-olds and a 30-year-old victim. Now, this was not just a random act of violence committed by a group of thugs out looking for trouble. That would be bad enough. This is a whole new level of evil, and I use the word evil knowing what it means. It was a cold, calculated attack that was dreamt up when the gang learned something about a friend who wanted to enter their gang. They saw him hanging out with a 30-year-old man who is openly gay. The revelation triggered what was to follow a series of horrifying events. The Latin King Goonies, their ages are 16 to 23 years old. Let that marinate in you for a moment. 16 to 23 years old. Every single one of these, if they are convicted, should be tried and convicted and serve as an adult because of the plan that they hatched. They tracked down the 17-year-old who they suspected might be gay. They brought him into a safe house, and there he was shoved against a wall, severely beaten, forced to take his clothes off, and then repeatedly hit on the head. He was wounded with a box cutter, and then he was sodomized with a plunger. This went on and on and on as they interrogated this 17-year-old and tried to get him to confess that he had sex with a 30-year-old man that they saw him with. He finally admitted that he had, and then they let him go, threatening him and tell him if he told anyone, he would get more. Not surprisingly, this 17-year-old didn't tell a soul. Even when he was questioned at the hospital that he had to visit, he lied to the hospital, saying that he had been jumped by strangers. What does that mean? Why would he lie? Does he maybe not believe in the justice system? This is just the beginning. The gang abducted another 17-year-old victim, also questioning him about his involvement with a 30-year-old gay man. They carried out an equally severe beating as the last beating, and they were again able to get him to confess to sleeping with a 30-year-old man. But this guy was not set free. The gang had hatched yet another plan. They had something else in store for this 17-year-old. You see, it always gets worse. They set a trap for the 30-year-old man, who was known around the neighborhood as the Queen. They invited him to what he thought was a party. It turned out to be a nightmare. As soon as he got there, he was attacked and tied up. The beatings for him lasted hours. He was forced to drink 10 large cans of malt liquor. He was forced then, the 17-year-old was forced to beat the man. Since we're adults here, could you just let that marinate for a moment? The 17-year-old is forced by this Latin King Goonie gang to beat a man that he had just been with. While the beatings were carried out, the other gang members went to the man's home. They attacked his 40-year-old brother. They demanded money. They took $1,000 and a 52-inch television. And the attacks continued for hours. They stripped the man down. They tied him up. They burned him with a cigarette. They had the 17-year-old take the cigarette and burn him on the nipple, and then elsewhere. Then they whipped him with a chain. And then they sexually assaulted the man with a baseball bat. As this was going on, the group of 16-year-olds cheered the attacks, shouting gay slurs at the victim. I read this story while I was on the plane. I didn't even know what to say. I couldn't even begin to understand the level of hatred and depravity. Who are these people? Who are these, not children, Who are these men? I'm sorry, but to do this to some other human being, you're a man, you're a monster. It is pure evil. Now, I've been out of pocket for the last few days and away from New York, so I haven't seen the coverage on this, but I'm sure these attacks are being labeled as anti-gay. These thugs were clearly anti-gay, but it goes way, way beyond anti-gay. This is not only anti-gay, it is anti-human. It is bigotry for sport. 16 to 23 years old. The hell is wrong with you? How does this happen? A phrase keeps running through my mind. For the love of man shall wax cold, because iniquity shall abound. The love of man shall wax cold. How does someone do this to another human being? You know, hatred doesn't start, it doesn't come in black boots with a red armband. It doesn't start there. How did we get here? It's easy to see hatred in this group, but I've never read anything as horrifying as that story, at least that I remember, at least in my own country. At the same time I'm reading this, I put this newspaper down and I pick up my iPad and I'm reading a few things that I had pulled down, some stories that were written about me. All kinds of crazy things have been written about me in the last couple of days because I announced on my program on Friday that I'm having some medical issues. And again, I want you to tell, they've ruled out all of the bad things. There was a possibility I had cancer, a possibility I had lupus or MS. I don't have any of those things. And it's taken me a few days to find out. But I was shocked at how many people and how many blog sites, these are people whose job it is to write stories, how many were writing stories that were so vitriolic about me. Look, I don't care what you think about me, but really? Really? The things that were said by professional writers. And then what was worse were the people on the blog sites that are just, they're not using even their real names. Okay. There were the ones that I expected to see, you know, I hope he dies, etc., etc. But this is what really shocked me, and this is why I bring this up now. What shocked me were the responses by some people who were, quote, defending me, end quote, responding with equally horrible comments, wishing harm on them, wishing... I read one where the guy said, you know, it's progressives like you that need to be rounded up. I read that. It was such a horrific post. That was just one line in it. Such a horrific post. I actually sat there on the plane and I thought to myself, that guy cannot be a fan of mine. That guy has to be a poser. He has to be trying to discredit me. I don't know. And that was the point. I don't know. It's getting hard to tell the good guys from the bad guys sometimes. Here's what I want to say to you today. First of all, have you read blog sites lately? If you can avoid them, I guess don't post or don't read the posts, because you'll just get caught up in this hatred. But if you ever see anybody doing hatred on me, please don't ever defend me. Don't defend me like that. Say something. We'll pray for you. I pray for you. Or ignore it. But don't write and engage in the hatred. It is sucking us in, all of us. We're being sucked in. If you really believe the things that you're posting in my defense, I don't want anything to do with you. Can you see what's happening to our country? Can you see what's happening to us as people? I know, and we'll talk about it a little bit more tomorrow. I had the most amazing conversation with this doctor at the Huntsman Cancer Institute. I've never had a conversation like this with a doctor before. It was